All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're back and here for episode 3 of Ranger Legacy. And I just watched the episode Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Day of the Dumpster. Now, I just want to start by saying you realize how bad the show actually was when you're 23 and rewatching it. But when I was like 4 or 5, it was amazing. Now, the next thing I want to bring up is I got the idea to do these videos from two guys named Matt and Michael from Australia, I believe, that do a podcast called Ranger Danger, where they're planning on watching one episode of Power Rangers a week, making a podcast about it. I'm about 30 some podcast episodes into their show, and I love it. And it's basically re energized my love of Power Rangers and made me think to do this show. So, now, what I want to talk about, we're going to get right into the episode and start with the cast. And as usual, down off screen here, you can see the page coming to view right now. I got my handy dandy black notebook. You can see in the reflection of my glasses too, so you'll know when I'm looking down at it. Now, the cast. This is the very first cast we had in America of Power Rangers. We had Amy Jo Johnson as Kimberly. Now, I don't remember if I said this in the previous video or not. Every kid that watched Power Rangers guy probably at one time had a crush on Kimberly. Let's face it. She was your typical popular pretty girl. Everybody kind of wanted to be with her. And that's part of the reason I have a deep-seated hatred for Tommy, is because he got to be with her eventually. And that's the only reason. If you remember me saying I thought Tommy was kind of a douche, that's why. Moving on from that. We have, and I don't know how to pronounce her name correctly. I think I've heard Twee, so I'm going to go with Twee. We have Twee Trang that played Trini. Now, Trini, honestly, I think is part of the reason I find nerdy girls kind of attractive now. But if you know and or you're familiar with it, Twee unfortunately passed away in 2001 in a car accident. Now, that's why a lot of the times when they bring her up, you'll see, I don't think they really ever acknowledged it, but a lot of the fans didn't know that the time that it happened, that it happened. They didn't find out until later on that Twee died. Anyway, we had David Yost as Billy. Now, I was always the Blue Ranger when we played Power Rangers at school because of Billy, honestly. And if you saw if you saw Ranger Legacy number 0, the beginning, which is my first video, that's why I talk about David Yost liking 2 photos of mine on Instagram. Because he was and still is one of my heroes. And moving on from him, we have Walter Emmanuel Jones as Zach. Now, here's where my issue sets in, and you all know it now. Power Rangers was inherently racist. We had a black guy as the Black Ranger, a Asian lady as the Yellow Ranger. I think Jason was supposed to be Native American. Or at least that's the story I've heard. And heard somewhere Tommy was supposed to be Jewish, and that was where the green came from. But anyways, it was inherently racist. That being said, Zach is one of my top 2 Mighty Morphin Power Rangers favorite Rangers. It's him and Billy. I got really nothing more to say about that. And then we have Austin St. John as Jason. Now, if you know the story behind why Austin St. John, Twee Trang, and Walter Jones originally left the show was because they fought for higher wages. And now Austin St. John's done some other things. Now he's a firefighter / EMT in Washington, D.C., and he goes to the conventions a lot. He came back in Zeo for the limited run the Gold Ranger had in Zeo. But yeah, that's Austin St. John. Now, I had a question. Actually, I forgot to acknowledge one of the cast members. David Fielding, that played Zordon. just an all-around great guy in person, from what I've heard. He loves when people tell him stories that Zordon personally affected them or something too. So, and the next thing I want to talk about is people have been asking me, when are you going to acknowledge the movies? And by people, I mean people I work with that know I do these videos. Have been saying, well, if you're going to do a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or a Power Rangers in general vlog, you have to do the movies. When are you going to do Turbo in the original Mighty Morphin movie? Well, that being said, I had planned on doing the original Mighty Morphin movie when we get introduced to Lord Zed and Rocky, Aisha, and Adam in the show. That way, we have some acknowledgement that these characters already exist in the world before I just watch the movie. And then Turbo, I'm going to do after I finish Zeo, because Turbo the movie was the setup to Turbo the show. So that's why I'll do that. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention before we get into the show, and I'm already at 6 minutes and we haven't even started talking about the show yet, is I'm going to be starting to write a fan fiction. And if I can figure out how to do it, I'll put it on my own site. I'll put it on the Facebook for this. I'll put it on something. Is going to be called... It's just going to be called The Rangers. And what I'm going to do for it is it's going to be 15, 20 years down the line from the original series. Which, if you know, and heard Ranger Danger, just managed to know it somehow, all the series basically don't acknowledge that Rangers ever existed before them. And you can learn that from Ninja Storm. Dustin, the yellow Ninja Storm Ranger, makes a comment in the very first episode. Like the Power Rangers. And Tori, the blue Ninja Storm Ranger, she says, Power Rangers. And then she makes a comment that you guys have been reading too many comic books. So, at least in the Ninja Storm universe, Power Rangers weren't a real thing to them. Now, whether that means each show takes place in a different universe, or just these other towns never heard of these teams of Rangers because they never came to their town. Which, they said the events of Mighty Morphin the movie affected the world. So, everybody should have known who these Rangers were at the time. Anyway, we don't really get acknowledgement that they knew that there was other teams of Rangers until Megaforce, Super Megaforce, when they have the Ranger keys. But it's acknowledged when other teams showed up in crossover specials. Oh no, there's another team of Rangers. Like, they never knew that. But I just totally lost my train of thought. Okay, it's set 20 years after the original Mighty Morphin. And Rita and Zed's son, which I don't think they ever had a son on the show, comes into power in Angel Grove. And he's half human, half whatever Zed was. And Zordon and Alpha are back. At this time, Alpha's like Alpha 25 or something. And they acknowledge they need to make a new team of Rangers. Well, we get the Mighty Morphin style Rangers all come back. Though the style team, not the actual Rangers. I already have characters, honestly. We have Xander, which was at one time an actual Power Ranger, but not that Xander. It's a different Xander that is Kimberly and Jason's son as the Red Ranger. We get Mac, M-A-C-K, as the new Green Ranger. Green Ranger's going to be a main member of the team this time. We get I believe her name was going to be Laura, Kat and Tommy's daughter, as the Pink Ranger. We get Zach, the original Zach, comes back as the new Blue Ranger. And we get Amanda as the new Yellow Ranger. which is no relation to any of the original Rangers. She's the only not legacy or original Ranger that comes into it. And then we find out later on, much like Green with Evil, there's a sixth evil, pseudo-evil Ranger known as the Gray Ranger. But he's actually going to be black, so we're going to call him the Black Ranger. He's going to be evil. He operates much like Merrick did in Wild Force, where Merrick had 3 Zords and made the Predator Zord. Our evil fit 6th Ranger, when he's still evil, even when he turns good eventually, is going to operate 5 Zords. He's going to have the lion, the ape, the eagle, the wolf, and the dragon. 5 Zords. And moving on, we're going to get into the show now, since we are at 11 minutes. First thing I want to talk about was the theme song still gets you jazzed. I mean, that's all there is to it. Next, the thing Rita climbs out of, they call it a space dumpster, but if you saw the video Zordon of Eltar, the fan-made YouTube movie, it's actually like a thing that Zordon used to capture her in. But it looks more like a trash can in the show than a dumpster. And then the moon. They're on the moon. Obviously, Japanese astronauts open up this thing on the moon, which has a sun, which we would know the sun would not be shining on the moon. For Christ's sake. And they all come out of it, and they say it's time to destroy the nearest planet. It just happens to be Earth. We get a very clear shot of Earth during the day. Like, it doesn't make sense. And then our first scene with the 5 Rangers is just basically showing you, hey, this is what they can do, and this is what they bring to the table as Power Rangers. And then Bulk and Skull, which, by the way, basically the longest running characters on Power Rangers, are defeated as they are every week by the power of somebody stepping to the side. And then we get Rita building her moon base, which, if we're supposed to believe it only took her the nighttime on Earth to do it, it only took her 12 hours. Which doesn't make sense. Should have took her more than 12 hours to build the moon base. Unless we're supposed to expect that the moon base already exists, or this isn't really the moon, and it's her home planet that we explored in Zordon of Eltar, which again wouldn't make sense. When the earthquake happens, Ernie tells everybody to stay calm, and he's the first one to take off running. Which we see Bulk and Skull get goop on their face for the first time because they get those smoothies all over themselves. Also, speaking of Bulk, I have here that Bulk is really good at karate, actually. When he does the side kick, when he tries to do the tornado kick, he's not so good. And Zordon, when he mentions 5 overbearing and emotional humans, Alpha immediately says, oh no, not teenagers. So Alpha apparently does not like teenagers. We learned that in this episode. Apparently every time there's an earthquake in Angel Grove, Rita's the cause, because Alpha says, oh no, this is the big one, we're all doomed, which I can only assume Alpha is referring to the San Andreas Fault, where they've said if it happens, California's gone. But Zordon immediately says, oh no, this is Rita. Rita's destroying the Earth. None of them seem scared by Zordon when he shows up and they're all teleported to the command center. Which is weird, because if I was teleported into a building I knew nothing about, and then this dude that's a floating head in a jar shows up, I'm going to be freaked out, honestly. The Power Morphers. He doesn't really explain anything. The Power Morphers just show up, and they're who they're supposed to be, where they're supposed to be at. And it's acknowledged at one point that the Morphers are sentient, and they know how to do things on their own, which is weird. It's like Saba later on when we get the White Ranger. Moving on. My big thing is, how does Zordon know what the personality traits of each of these people are? Like, he says about their personality traits. How long has he been watching them in the viewing globe? Has he had them picked out since they were born, or since they were old enough to be Rangers? Like, what's the deal there? I don't understand that part. It's honestly kind of creepy. He calls Kimberly smart, which Trini is actually the smart female ranger. I'm not saying Kimberly's dumb. No offense to Amy Jo Johnson. Love the character. Love her work on other stuff. Love her music. But Kimberly was not supposed to be the smart female ranger. Uh, Also, they all immediately turned it down except for Jason being Power Rangers. What kind of brat turns down saving the world? That's my only thing. Uh, Again, going back to Power Rangers being racist, we saw hip hop music played while Zach did his hip hop keto moves. Which, yes, you can tell me it's called hip hop keto. They needed to play some hip hop music. No, it's just racism on the Rangers' part. They don't want the power, but they still morph. Like, they're all arguing about being Rangers, but then when they're getting their ass kicked by the putties, Jason immediately goes, let's do it, and they all morph. Like, they didn't just say they didn't want to be Power Rangers. Goldar. Goldar is a giant pussy. He's winning the fight all the way up until when they summon the Power Sword for the Megazord. As soon as they say that, he says, this isn't over, and he's gone. And this isn't the last time Zordon fights for like all of 10 seconds, and then when he starts to lose, he disappears. After they defeat Goldar for the first time, Zordon lays down his 3 rules, which is never use power for personal gain, which Tommy did, so I don't see why Zordon left him keep the power coin after he became good. Never escalate a battle unless Rita forces you to. There's several times they used the Megazord when they really didn't need to, and there's several times they used their power cannon when they really didn't need to. So they always kind of broke the never escalate a battle rule. And their final thing was keep your identity a secret, which they did. They always did. Eventually, I think Bulk and Skull figured out that they're Rangers. But other than that. And there's also the bad 90s not joke that Kimberly makes at the very end of the episode, where they're talking about, oh, I don't know, my hair gets tangled in the suit or in the helmet. And then they all kind of go, oh, no, Kimberly, come on. And then she goes, not. And that's like the worst joke ever. I used to do it, and I'm ashamed to admit that I used to make those jokes. But the next episode is going to be Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Episode 2, High Five. And if you've stuck with me for the first 2 videos, knowing I'm doing a Power Rangers video vlog as a 23-year-old, thank you. And let's face it, you're not going anywhere now if you stuck through this video, which came in at a little over 18 minutes, when I haven't even, like, for the first 10 minutes, wasn't even talking about the episode. I was just talking about random shit in the first 10 minutes. But that's it for this episode. And as always, hope to see you in the next video. May the power protect you.